What did I teach you?
You are New York, you're a number one.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York, you're a number one. Peace, everybody. Can everybody hear me? If so, please type it into the chat. Want to make sure it's all good. Excellent. Honest to everybody for coming through. I greatly appreciate it. Excellent. Just please make sure you're muted so that way there's no overlap or on the reverb and all of that, if possible. I hope all has been well. I hope everybody's been doing their thing for the most part. Striving to keep your head on in the swivel with everything that's been happening in the so-called apocalypse that we find ourselves in. You know what I'm saying? These devils don't make it easy. Yet at the same time, we are definitely, in a sense, where we need to be. Because believe it or not, this is probably one of the greatest times for us to actually be alive, because we actually get to see all of these wonders unfold before us. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely wanted to give honors and praise and thanks for everybody that's been supporting or continue to support over the years. I really appreciate it. Lojo, I don't know. Can you hear me now? Everybody else said that they can hear, so I don't know. What's up with your joint? But everybody says that they can hear, right? So hopefully your joint will come in. Does anybody have any questions about anything before we get started? Or any answers or anything? Before we, jump into it. If so, you can definitely type it into the chat and we can go over it. Thanks everybody also for the birthday wishes. I really appreciate it. It was really cool, very insightful, and pretty chill considering everything that's going on. I'm definitely share with you one of the things that popped out on my so-called birthday, which I thought was very interesting. I'll share that with y'all real quick. Okay, why did that go out? That's weird. They're both in here. I'll check on that in a minute. Give me a second to pull it up. Yeah, anybody have any questions, just show, you can type it in real quick while I pull this up for you. Just type it into the chat. The Bill Cosby thing. What do I think about the Bill Cosby thing? He was with them people for so long and doing, I guess the best he thought he could do, that, he's unfortunately being still beset upon by all of the people that have been trying to get that land from him for so long. I think that's part of the issue. He never came up off the land that they wanted him because of where his house, for whatever reason, is situated, and all of what they want that land for. So because he would refuse to give it up, they're going to keep messing with him until something gives in that regard. But I commend him for not, you know what I'm saying? Because so much of us, or so many of us, have unfortunately fallen victim to the things that these demons always want us to do or participate in, that have no greater means other than our own destruction. So the fact that he's been holding out for as long as he could, I think is pretty dope. Whether or not he is the demon that they say he is, all I can say is, when you lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. And, he was working with them people for a long time, kind of playing both sides against the middle. So, I can't really call it, but I don't like seeing any elder being put in that position, especially when you got all of these devil elders like Rockefeller and the rest of these people still around here taking people's organs, benefiting off the destruction in the world, and ain't nothing happening to them. However, because they are part of the decoy system, you know what I mean? They get a lot of free passes, unfortunately. Just like what's happening right now with the so-called Africans that are now out here trying to promote and pump themselves to get some sort of reparations for slavery, which to me was just almost insane in the context that the way that the story goes, they were the ones who were allegedly enslaving and selling their own people into bondage. So I don't know how they can go from being the ones that was enforcing and selling everybody into bondage to then turn around being the ones to now want to receive reparations from the people that they allegedly sold everybody to. Like, that's kind of crazy to me. I don't know how they can be the victim and the perpetrator at the same time. But this also shows me how many different people across the world still seek to destiny swap with those of us who were made prisoners of war after the full scale onslaughts and perpetual Moorish um, cataclysms that have happened to us, that we've documented here over the many years. You know what I'm saying? It seems like a lot of them is still trying to benefit off of that. The fact that the Ghanaian president again also is trying to meet with Mandami, which is very crazy to me, being that Mandami is one of the biggest racist slash fake African diasporists, communists that have basically taken advantage and is about to run New York into the literal ground by destroying the so-called melanated, or what they refer to as the black middle class, all out of New York, by raising the property taxes to basically price out anybody that has anything of their own property that they own. So that way he can pass that over to people who have not worked for what it is that they have. And so that way he can basically give everybody free stuff, which is the basis of what communism is. It's there to take what people have actually worked hard over the years for and seize all of it, so that way the state can come in, the state can own your property, the state can own your children, and give it to people who only want to live off the state and have free shit. Which is why every communist regime in the world has basically fallen or destroyed itself or devoured itself into another form of totalitarianism. So when people say that the Russian, communism or whatever, no, the Russians are socialists. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's levels to this. So the Russians, when they were full out communists, led to the destruction of what was the Soviet Union. So after that, they had to reconstitute themselves as a Russian federation, which meant that they were basically going to fall under the jurisdiction of oligarchy and handle what they refer to as soft socialism. You want to see hard communism, you got to look at places like Cuba, and you see what's happening with them. As great as the Cuban medicine doctors and stuff are, they had to do something to perpetuate themselves and make themselves somewhat needed in the world, because outside of that, they are at the beck and call and the destruction of most of the world. You know what I'm saying? Based again upon the fact that communism doesn't work. You know what I mean? In the long term, it can't, because anybody who has any common sense and actually wants to do better for themselves cannot do so or flourish in a communist society. So you can have people talking about how great communist are in a capitalist society. You can have socialism in a capitalist society, but you cannot have capitalism in a socialist society. And because most people don't know the difference, because again, they've been brutalized by false education, they are just basically going by what white liberal women, and usually the people who follow the white liberal women are the so-called black women, right? Who act as the crash dummies for their agendas. You know what I'm saying? And they usually vote for things that they themselves don't have to participate in, which then makes it harder for everybody else to live. So they doomed to fail. Matter of fact, United States, Israel, and Argentina are the three main countries that voted against them accepting that. Because see, the so-called small hats are the ones who want to act like the Holocaust that they went through, well, that they paid to go through during the so-called Hitlerian era, or what they call World War II. They want to make it seem like they are the ones who have have been most persecuted in the world, even though they are the ones who are funding a genocidal ethno state that has created a perpetual slave and genocidal class that allows them to rape and murder prisoners and blow up and kill babies and stuff like that. So of course, they're going to come out against that. Also, the United States doesn't want to be saddled with all of the issues that are coming from the International Criminal Court, because they have basically listed Trump and the rest of these people as war criminals. And so after they leave office, they're trying to create a status quo by which no sitting United States president now or in the future can be punished for all of the genocidal maniacal things that the United States corporate authoritative government has been establishing. You know what I'm saying? So they're trying to create it where nobody can ever be persecuted for all of the BS that they basically put in the world through at this point, which to me shows that they've also created a two-tier type of government. So because piss rail is getting blown into the atmosphere, now what you're having is a diaspora of Pisraelians going across the world, now trying to set up little Israels all over any place that they can go into. So one of the places they're invading right now is Cyprus. Another place they're invading right now is Argentina. Another place they're invading is Kenya. Another place they're invading is Fiji. Australia is on the map. Is on the menu. Excuse me. And they plan to basically try to do the same thing that they did there in all of these other countries. But because these countries have already been inundated with Israeli spies and agitators and deep knock moles, you see what I'm saying? They are the ones that are in there trying to switch up the governmental parameters that would then allow them to have more control over the state to be able to then do what they basically doing to the Palestinians to any of the nations that I just mentioned. You know what I'm saying? You're dealing with genocidal maniacs. You're dealing with cannibals. You understand? You're dealing with child rapists. So these people are just the worst, and every evil, in a sense, can be traced back to them. Yet, due to the immense propaganda and the fact that they've occupied the United States government for as much as they have, you just got to kind of take it with a grain of salt at the same time. Yeah, yeah, they definitely on it like that. You know what I'm saying? So that's definitely one of the things happening. So yeah, so on my birthday, remember we was talking about Malik Toss and the rest of them. So it's crazy. Me and the Queen was driving through Andalus the other day, like I said, on my birthday, and literally we ran across an ostentation of
You are incredible.
peacocks. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Right after we was talking about Malik Toss and the Peacock King and all of that. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely wanted to, kind of share that with y'all to show you just how almost instantaneous the things that we speak on actually come to fruition in real life. You know what I'm saying? It was crazy. They just like appeared. We was just driving and they literally just appeared, to the point when the queen saw them, she started literally crying, like, wow, like this is, we'd have never seen this if we was in New York. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, just on the street. Imagine just driving and then just seeing these things. You know what I'm saying? Just in the street like that. It was just really crazy. I'm trying to play it. I don't know why it's thing, but you can see what I'm saying. See, he just opened up and just let me see the whole situation. So it was just really, really a blessing again. And then what was crazy is that in the diadem of my turban, I had a peacock feather. You know what I'm saying? So this is what I mean about the things that we talk about just really coming into fruition at times when we least expect it, and how, regardless of how negative and horrible things are or can seem, just around the corner, you know what I'm saying? There can be something else happening that allows us
Right?
to really see.
She can make me cry. They're so beautiful.
Right?
I've never seen something like this before.
You know what I'm
They know
saying?
when you're looking at them.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look how he went into submission for you.
Praise Allah. You're beautiful.
You are the most beautiful word ever.
And they know it too.
Because I can't even see.
I got him.
See how
my
his joint is like a
goodness,
train.
look at your train.
Word.
I have never seen this in real life. You're so pretty.
Look at you.
Oh my God.
Right.
Oh my God. I've never seen something that pretty. Just up close like that.
It's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, y'all. Like we have more power over the physical world in reality than I think that we give ourselves credit for. And like I said, we was just going in on the Yazidis and how they exist and how we see them. And then for, like I said, literally the Peacock King to manifest was just awesome. Because like I said, this is just another version of Amen, right? And Amen, which is the hidden one, will represent that which is um, adjacent to us, or that is directly in our face. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying that to say that manifestation, when it comes to real application of one's own intuitive power, is definitely prevalent in this day and age that we in. In the same way that these devils be coming out trying to manifest the things that they want, we can do so as well. You know what I mean? This is one of the other reasons why I heard that they not going. Then right after this, I heard that the Kurds is no longer going to be used. Like this, the day of, right? So we talk about the Kurds, how they was going to use them as crash dummies to do that, and why the Kurds are always persecuted by the Sunnis and the Shias due to their affinity for Malik Toss, and who is Amin and all of that. And then boom, this happens on my birthday. Then the day after my birthday, or either that night, I was watching something with Donnie T, and he was talking about how they no longer going to get the Kurds involved with the skirmish because they don't want them to get hurt and this and that. So I was just looking at it like, see, we literally out here saving niggas. You know what I'm saying? Like we literally out here saving whole groups of people just by putting out who and what these people really be about, what they really are out there participating in. So that's what I'm saying. Let's not ever try to disregard our power, or trying to like make it seem like we don't have the ability to keep uh, a spiritual record of who we are and the things that, you know what I'm saying, we're a part of. So I definitely wanted to put that out there. Anybody else have any questions before we jump into this? You know what I mean? But yeah, that African thing was really crazy. That really showed me like, wow, these people they really don't have no shame. They'll just they'll jump on anybody's joint. Like they'll try to take credit for whatever they doing. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, I don't know how y'all are going about this when y'all are the ones talking about how, you know what I mean, when the stories in the movies is them going in and selling their own people. At least that's how the story was going. And so now for y'all to go from that to now saying that you deserve reparation, I'm like, what? How does this work? Especially when Libya right now is a slave state right now. You know what I'm saying? Due to Obama and the rest of them killing and destabilizing Gaddafi, all because they didn't want him to establish a protectorate zone by which they would create a unified African currency. You know what I'm saying? And so they had to torpedo that, and now you got all of these people in Libya of multi African countries, multinational African countries going there, getting caught up, going into slavery. And in the Arab states, the Arabs be enslaving people, stealing their passports, beating them, hanging them, stealing their organs. They doing all types of stuff to so-called Africans today. And that has nothing to do with white people. I mean, these Arabs doing this, and they don't have no referendum against them. They not going in to these countries. They not invading Libya to free their own people. None of that. So how are y'all talking about slavery, some shit that happened according to your stories, in which none of y'all got any genetic relationship or connection to the people whom you saying was enslaved, while then at the same time ignoring the day-to-day slavery going on in the continent every day? It's crazy to me. It don't make sense. You know what I'm saying? It just don't make sense, and it doesn't gel with what it is that y'all trying to get across. Like who is this? Who is any of this stuff for? You know what I'm saying? Especially when you got members of the enemy nations in your nation low-key dictating to y'all what y'all going to do. It's amazing to me. You got so much to say and so much to build on, you know what I mean, with all of this stuff. But then, like I said, y'all not doing nothing to help the people that's being enslaved by y'all every day. It don't make sense at all. You know what I mean? And it seemed like I said, they low-key trying to destiny swap by still trying to act like they got a handle on a pot that they themselves have given up. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all didn't y'all see The Woman King? Didn't y'all see that movie? Didn't they say that they used to bring them around the tree of memory, where they would make them go around the tree backwards, so that way they could negate all of the karma that they knew that they was incurring by enslaving allegedly their own people? This is what they said that they was doing. So now how y'all coming around and then trying to flip it into that? Like it don't make sense to me. It's just crazy, you know. And then like what if we notice it and we call it out, like we're now what, anti reparations? How are y'all haven't even explained how y'all getting this? You know what I'm saying? Like you're not even explaining how this makes sense. Y'all just throwing Hail Marys at everything. While also, I think the United States, another reason why the United States decided they wasn't going to sign off on it, because they know that through the 14th Amendment, they enslaving everybody that's in jail. You know what I'm saying? They doing that too. So, it's a lot of craziness going on with these people, where they really acting like they are somehow like not a party to the same atrocities that they now acting like they was against. Like it just doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? To me at least. Y'all other people may have a different opinion of it, but to me it just seemed crazy. Like this. Like, let me show you this. Also, another reason why they vetoed it is because the Treasury came out last week and said that the United States is totally insolvent. Y'all heard that? That's not good. You know what I mean? Like, that's not good. I mean, we always knew that they was insolvent due to all of the treachery and the low key slavery exports and stuff that they are always involved in and have been doing. Why can't I always find this thing? Okay, let me try. All right, let's go. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. How they trying to, just flip it on everybody. But yeah, they came out the other day and said that they was now in the United States is officially insolvent. This is their treasury. Now the treasury belongs to the republic. We're gonna get into what that means essentially, but they just came out and basically just said that the United States itself is just totally insolvent as the treasury. So that means insolvency means what? They don't have any money to do anything that they're doing. So the question is, where's the money coming from? Right? If they don't have the ability to do this. Here we go. This is what I mean about the Africans too. Now, this is a quote from the Israeli ambassador in Ghana. This is how crazy these niggas are. Now, one of the reasons why these niggas is broke is because all of them are criminals, right? And they're all working for other nations, but they haven't listed themselves as foreign agents. So they're all basically knocks, which means, again, that they're open criminals, right? So you can work for another nation in the United States the way that they got it set up, but you got to list and you got to declare that that's what you are. If you don't, then you're considered a knock, right? And as a knock agent, now if they find you and catch you doing some illegal stuff, you now can openly go to jail. So here's this nigga right here. This is from Facebook. This brother posted it. He said, look, the North Carolina Senator Warren Daniel allegedly caught trading stocks on the Senate floor. This is literally a federal crime. That's what I'm saying. These niggas be committing federal crimes on the congressional floor, on the Senate floor. And nobody's running up on these niggas and doing that. Why? Because the FBI director is a plant, right? An industry plant that basically is just in it for the perks. He just like using the private jets and impressing his WWE girlfriend and the rest of these types of people. You know what I'm saying? Meanwhile, these niggas is doing insider trading on the congressional floor and getting away with it, right? So when you ask, well, why is this going like that? Because again, they're using all of their influence to line their own pockets while trying to create laws to impede the actual people from their own rights. Fiji, which is one of the smallest islands in the world, which has been occupied by the brutish and the rest of these niggas for as long as we can remember, these niggas is out here defending Israel from genocide charges, talking about how a lot of the charges is hearsay. Like, what? Then this nigga right here, he's the ambassador. This is the Israeli ambassador in Ghana right now. See how you got a pin with Israel and Ghana? Like, how are you doing this? So he's an Israeli agent, ambassador in Ghana. And he says, while we fully recognize the unparalleled scale and cruelty of these crimes, talking about slavery, we cannot accept the language that effectively establishes a hierarchy among crimes against humanity. Such formulations risk diminishing the gravity of other atrocities, see, including the Jewish Holocaust by the Nazis. The same Nazis that these so-called Jews was funded through Lord Rothschild, right? And the Venetian oligarchy and the agreement between the so-called Zionists and the Nazis that allowed them to perpetuate this fraud for as long as they have. So basically, they saying if we acknowledge this type of slavery, which happened way before the so-called state of Israel even existed, then somehow or another they are not going to be seen as the most oppressed, even though they have their own ethno state that is genocidally oppressing everybody and their neighbors. Matter of fact, them niggas just annexed the southern portion of Lebanon, and ain't nobody saying nothing. They literally cut the country in half, right? And are now saying that they're not going to give it back to the Lebanese. While all of this is happening, a video, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? I thought everything was sounding all right. Everybody muted, right? While at the same time this is happening, okay, cool. While at the same time this is happening, AI Netanyahu, because he's dead. So whoever's the AI dude in the mask now with him or whatever, they got an old videotape of him while he's being interrogated by the Israeli police, by his own country's police, where he openly admitted that they created Hamas, that they fund them, that they are the ones who created the Hamas government, along with their friends in the United States, which again is a treasonous crime against his own people. Look it up. This just happened. So it's not looking good for anybody involved. And the fact that they're annexing a whole nother portion of the country, as well as the fact they're openly undermining this nigga Donnie. Donnie said, look, we got a ceasefire with these niggas. We're going to implement, we're going to do this now. As soon as he did this, what did they do? They started bombing the same places that they told them not to bomb. So what he's basically saying is, regardless to what you niggas are doing, we're killing as many of these people as we want to, and y'all ain't gonna do nothing about it but die. And we're supposed to, like, what? Just accept this while these people are still talking about that these people is your greatest ally? How is your ally setting you up to get murdered? With friends like that, who need enemies? Right? As they say. This is the problem with this color war that they're dealing with. Because, like I told you, nobody is really in charge. Everybody is using this as a means to fulfill their own agenda. Within a couple of days, there ain't going to be no UAE states. You understand? Because they was all propped up by the United States military to begin with. So the fact that they all being bombed into the Stone Age, they never had the long-term infrastructure to be able to sustain any of this, because they were conned into establishing this type of agreement with the fictitious corporate United States, which itself is an occupational government. It doesn't exist. It is a fiction, right? Because it was established as such. Why? Because it was established under the auspices of being a terrorist state to begin with. Because the whole idea of it came about through a usurpation of the original people. You know what I'm saying? Who were always here. So this is the issue that we're finding ourselves in. Because none of these people really have the right to rule or function, because they're all operating from offices, all executing actions from vacant offices. Israel created it. Israel created Hamas along with the United States, just like they created ISIS, just like they created the Mujahideen and all of these other people during the 80s. There's a movie called Charlie Wilson's War where they tell you this. They show you this. With Tom Hanks playing an alcoholic senator who basically worked with the CIA to basically create the parameters for what would be the Taliban, ISIS, all of that. Just like they created the PLO back in the days. All of this was created by these intelligence agencies to keep the so-called Middle East destabilized around the colonial occupational government of Israel. This just what they did. This is just how they run it. It's how it's always been. We're just waking up to the fact of this now, but this is again how it's always been. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, they've been running this decoy situation from the very beginning. From going all the way back to the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand. Because like I told you, all these niggas got fezzes and everything in the closet. All of these people were set up as decoy, as tranny, whatever decoys by the so-called black nobility that itself had been waning power for centuries and basically reorganized itself around the woodwos, i.e. the whites that they had decided to use as the decoys to be able to set up the corporate governments after the age of the republics started to falter. See, you have what you call the age of discovery. Then you had the age of enlightenment. Then you had the age of adventure. Then you had the age of it was discovery, enlightenment, adventure, and then one more, the age of industry. Excuse me, yeah, the age of republics, and then we go into the age of industry. That's when everything started to flip up and turn sideways because they all started to practice war by deception, which is the model for the nation of Israel. This is how they run everything. This is how they've been running everything. Yeah, Addison said the African American term created in the 1980s also for these tactics currently to be autopilotly accepted in these current eras. Yes. Denationalization, misnomers, legalese, these were all ways that they were able to take control and use people against each other by using semantics and language. You see what the ambassador in Ghana said? He said the language, see what I'm saying? The language that's used is not cool because they want to always perpetuate the fact that they're somehow oppressed, even though they are the ones doing the oppressing. They are the ones funneling the human trafficking. They are the ones whose God tells them it's okay to rape and eat children and blow up hospitals. Like the reason why the United States blew up that school in the beginning of the skirmish of the armed conflict was because those coordinates were given to them allegedly by the Mossad. So in order to start the war off, they wanted to have a ritual sacrifice of the enemy's children. You understand? And then they went about killing the whole enemy's leadership and family. Like, that's not how you wage war. Like, when you play chess and you get down to two kings, a war of kings, the kings don't kill each other. That's not how that's supposed to go. You keep the kings and the leaders in play so that way there can be some sort of negotiated surrender or some sort of ability for the combatants to be able to assuage their people. You don't kill the kings right off. That's not how you do. You get the king to capitulate. That's basic law of war. You know what I'm saying? You don't kill the kings unless you drastically have to. You know what I'm saying? When Alexander was fighting Darius and Darius wound up running and all of that, he chased that man down to the point where he didn't kill him. Who killed him was his own people. And then when Alexander, according to the story, if you believe Alexander the Great was a real person, when he found that out, he made sure he found the people who killed Darius. And he had them slaughtered on behalf of Darius, his enemy, the one that he fighting. So this is what I'm telling you. Like, there's a way that these wars and everything was supposed to be fought. And these people have been going against that, especially that because they have no honor, because their God, which is the Talmud, is there to tell them that they are to literally abolish and literally eat the enemy. You know what I'm saying? You're dealing with cannibalistic, genocidal, nihilistic maniacs. You understand? Who will kill their own people, who will allow their own people to be slaughtered in order for these sacrifices to continue. That's what you're dealing with. You understand? So, like I said, so on your screen, this is an example of what I'm saying. The real hidden hand is not the niggas with their hands in their pocket. You know what I'm saying? Those are just the actors. The real hidden hand, like I said, is the true black nobility, Venetian oligarchy people that we've been exposing for years. You know what I'm saying? On this channel as well as many others. You know what I'm saying? Who happen to be of different bloodlines, whether it be Moorish or Venetian, which is Moorish, and all of the rest of them. You know what I'm saying? So when you have these people who are vehemently against you exposing or you proclaiming who and what you are, right? And then always trying to point out how dirty the people was in the past. Like everybody's ancestors was dirty in the past. Everybody was subject and was enslaving other people. Everybody was doing that. When they talk about, they want to make it seem like the so-called Native Americans, which is really the Moorish Americans or the so-called Amerindians of these people, they always want to make it seem like these people were so, just and kind, and these white people just came on boats and they just slaughtered them and gave them the flu and smallpox blankets and all of that. Like, you're bugging. Like, the nations that were here were warring with each other for centuries before any of these Europeans showed up. That's a fact. You understand? These wars that you see them fighting now were just a lot of them were inherited wars. Why you think they had to create the Great Law of Guyanaschwa? Why you think they had to create the what you call it, the Algonquin Confederacy and all of that? The Algonquins wasn't just one group. Like, that was a language group that was at war with other language groups who were calling themselves different aspects of what their national customs and all of that was on the land here before any Europeans showed up. You understand what I'm saying? So they want you to make it seem like these people we was all just so nice with each other and was so, like, if that's the case, then why are we so hard and crazy with each other today? Because we are the descendants of those warriors, of those clans, of those tribes, of those nations that had these deep-rooted problems with us based upon that, and sought to use other nations that was coming over here as a one-up on those of us that wasn't dealing with them. You understand? Whether it was the Yamasees against the Seneca, or the Panahasua against the Patuan, or the so-called Seminoles against the Cherokee. Like, everybody was banging on each other after a certain point, man. And we're dealing with people who had great cities and technology and stuff like that. Why do you think a lot of these old cities and stuff was burnt down and melted and stuff? We keep putting these Europeans and these white people as the ones that was in control of all of that and was the basis of all of that, when they wasn't. They weren't. They came up off of all of that because they were put in play, in power, by people that look like us to fight against other people that look like us. This is why they had to shut down the USAID. You see this? They was using the money to fund these niggas. And half of these niggas is Jewish. Half of these Arabs that you see is all from Israel too. The Saudi royal family and all of them that's running stuff today out of Riyadh, these ain't the original ones that was there. The original ones that was there was darker than us. Was darker than me. These people are, I told you, it's decoys. They're actors. They're bad actors. And they've been running game on everybody, making you hate people based upon how they look, when at the root, at the top, all of these niggas is working together. You know what I'm saying? That's just what it is. because none of this stuff was supposed to happen like this. None of these people were supposed to be in power. They only came up based upon us falling. Remember that. The reason why a lot of people, a lot of Moors and stuff like that at the same time was exempt from stuff was because they were the ones who were actively fighting and trying to uphold different aspects of the culture as it was being destroyed. Yes, crypto-Khazarians. While in the Northeast Tennessee, Carolina, some Cherokees absorbed the Jewish religious practices from their neighbors. The Jewish-influenced Cherokees became progressives, and the new Cherokee Nation, see that? The new ones, right? But always at odds with the original ones, the original who they refer to as the conjurers, the darkies, us, right? And those that converted to Christianity after the Methodist evangelical meetings in Georgia. However, they ultimately decided to follow elements of who? The Moravian Church. See? This is where we get the Creek, the Yamasee, and the so-called Cherokee War, because the Cherokees was taken over from the Tasalagi, the real ones. Guy was a title of nobility that was also copied by the people in what is Gaul, which became France. This is where the French term Guy or Guy comes from. But here it was Guy, like Ghee. Hicks stated that during the first years of the Creek, which is the Yamasee, the Moors, Cherokee War, the Cherokees captured thousands of Creeks, i.e. Greeks, who were either burned to death or sold as slaves in Charleston, South Carolina. The same Charleston, South Carolina where the Sundry Free Moors Act was from. That says that you can't do this to members of the Moorish Empire who were subjects of the Sultan, not subject to the Sultan. Right? The Cherokees were always on the defensive in the last year of the war, 1754. Many so-called Cherokees were killed in battle, and most of their villages were burned. Ultimately, the Cherokees lost all the lands they had won when they signed the Treaty of Peace with the Creeks, who were the Yamasee, who again were the Moors, who was wiping them out because they was going against everything, because they was adopting the so-called Jewish, i.e. Hebrew, i.e. Child sacrifice, you know what I'm saying? Way of life where they was murdering their own people because the amalgamated ones was trying to take control from the original ones. The so-called Cherokees did not build mounds, nor did they bury their dead in mounds under piles of stone. You hear that? So you can't be, so if you're saying you're a Cherokee and you was part of the original people, right? You can't claim to be from the mound builders because they never built none of that. The people who built them were the people who identified as Moors. According to Henry Turner and Ayers versus the United States, which has not been overturned. So when they say, well, where's the proof for the Moors and where's the proof? I've just told you. I just told you. The Cherokees did not move into the North Carolina until a plague, had greatly weakened the mound builders, the Moors, the Washita. He means my ancestors, the It-State Creeks or Maya descendants, because the Yamasee, the Maya were all, the Creeks, they was all part of the same bloodline. The Creeks killed off, the Cherokees killed off or drove off the mound builders, then burned the mound built temples, and then replaced them with Cherokee townhouses, aka council chambers, When the judge goes into deliberation, don't they say that he's taking counsel in his chambers? Doesn't he say that? Right? But the Moors was the ones that did all of the bullshit, right? Well, it can't be both. You can't say that, oh, with the Cherokee Indians, we was this and that. Yes, but which ones? Which ones were you? Of which class? The ones that was a part of the original, or the ones who was trying to remake it in the image of the foreign so-called Jews or Moravians that they had themselves ingratiated them to, so that way they could basically take over and then try to bring them into a so-called modern age under a whole new way of life, which they themselves was not a party to, because they were hybrid amalgamates. The Cherokees never lived south of the Hiwassee River. You hear that? Never lived south of the Hiwassee River until after the American Revolution. They could not have possibly built the track rock stone walls. You see that? So none of this infrastructure that they are giving themselves credit for did they actually create. It was the ones before them who were still connected to the old Moorish Empire. But they still want to say, oh, well, the Moors wasn't here and the Moors wasn't this. And it's always about what we not. Right? Because these niggas is obsessed with keeping this fake history of themselves relevant. When it was the ones that, when they are the ones that went against their own culture that they talk about. The same way the Africans is doing today. So all I'm saying is, he who is without sin cast the first stone, because it seemed like everybody is trying to claim everybody else's destiny and where they from and who they was a part of, when none of these people is basically living up to the potentials of what these people was talking about. You know what I'm saying? So let's just keep that in mind. It all was usurped. All of this was taken by force when it wasn't supposed to, because everybody fell from their noble nature. Everybody was falling victim. Everybody was getting their lands taken. Everybody was switching sides. You know what I'm saying? Nobody was exempt from that. If it was, then we wouldn't be in the circumstance that we in today. Everybody was getting taken advantage of. That's just the facts that nobody really wants to just deal with. Everybody wants to say or want to claim what they feel that they are without any extensive study and trying to negate one for the other. How you picking one ancestor over the other when they literally forced ancestors to marry one another in order to squash beef? Which then what? Inundated the bloodline with different what do you call it? With indemnity within them. So everybody is dealing with this unreconcilable push and pull energy that's within them, due to the fact that there was a lot of forced conversions. There was a lot of forced marriages. There was a lot of rapes. There was a lot of war camps. People growing up in war camps for over decades. You understand what I'm saying? Which then perverts and flips the mind, yo. Everybody was in that. And now today, like I said, you got niggas trying to destiny swap it, flip it again, and act like they wasn't the ones selling their own people. It's crazy. It's crazy. But then if you say that, everybody pointing their fingers at Moors as if they was the only one. Well, I guess you got to do that, being that we was the parent culture for all of these other fake cultures that started to promote themselves after the fracturing of the Greater Moorish Empire. And then once it was every man for itself, it literally was that. But this was going on before all of this even happened, before the United States was even founded. These things that we keep calling resets, these are the reconquistas that have been successively happening to the country, to all countries since our fall, which is why everybody is so predicated on keeping us at the bottom. It's not just by chance that all the melanated people that look like us around the world is receiving the same hate. Like I said, we're the only people that are preyed on everybody, including ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Nobody else has that distinction but us. And we don't have no army. We don't have no navy. We don't have none of that. Yet and still, it seemed like nobody could do nothing without us. Because again, we were perpetually invaded by waves of foreigners, by waves of them, over and over again for over 250 years straight. Of course you're going to forget. Of course you're going to fall victim. Of course you're not going to be in the original place that you was at. It's a wonder that we have the common sense that we do still, for all that has happened to us. And yet still we got people still to this day trying to come over here and again destiny swap with us. It's crazy. There's a book that you should get. We were talking about the paper Empire last week, right? Well, there's a book that you should get, that anybody that's into constitutional law and things like that should get. It's by a dude who lived after the founding of the so-called Constitution, if that's what you want to call it. And these things. Let me pull it up for you. Everything was remade. You have to understand that. Remember when they talked about, you ever heard anybody say, yo, well, the J didn't exist, right? When they be talking about that, the J didn't exist. It came into being at a certain time. When? Who created it? Does anybody know? Who was the one that created it? We always say that it didn't exist, but then one day was created. Well, who? Can we trace it to an individual? Has anybody ever exposed who that was? Addison said the small hats. Basically, well, tonight, let's expose him. His name was Gian Gregorio Tricinio. And when did he come about? Right around the fall of Granada. See that? I-478 to I-550. See that? See that? See how all of the fuckery starts right around the time that Granada starts falling. Right? It's always around the time that Granada starts falling. After the fall of humanity. Humanity itself fell in I-492. And everything after that is the apocalypse. Okay? This is who it was. An Italian Renaissance grammarian, as credited as the father of the letter J. In I-524, he published a work that first formally distinguished the soft J, as in jam, from the vowel I, separating them into distinct characters. Before this, I and J were used interchangeably, with the J originally serving as a variant of I. So this would then translate to the Greek Iosus, right? Which then was translated into the English Jesus. Jeosus, Jesus, Jesus. You understand? So at one point, you have to understand, at the time that Yeshua existed, the term Jesus was not even a thought. The term Jesus, or even Iosus, did not even exist. His name was Yeshua, right? That's what they say, right? And Yeshua was so-called Hebrew, but those so-called Hebrews, these real Hebrews, spoke Aramaic. Yet, the translation of the Bibles did not go from Aramaic into the West in Asia. They went from Greek. The Hellenists, right? The paganists. Where did the Aramaic translations go to? They went by way of the Ethiops, right? The dark melanated people who themselves originated from India. Because the original Lyabella class, when the capital was at Lyabella before the Axumites came, they were indigenous. They were part of another group that they referred to as the Turkana, right? And the Axumites came and then ripped the capital from Lyabella and then moved it to Axum, and then they were the ones who initiated all of that. When a lot of their progenitors came from the Indus or Hindustan. The catalyst, Tricinio, separated the sounds in his work 1524 work Epistiola del Tricinio, de le lettere, nevo manente agriente ne la lingua italiana. So again, this is a Christianized Moor, right? Who is now calling himself Italian, who is now taking the name of Eosus at this time, run by the Greek, and is now changing it to Jeosus, which then gets translated into the other ones as Jesus. So if this is only about 600 years old, so that means everybody that's referring to themselves or referring to Yeshua as Jesus, right, is following what Gian Grigori Trisanio dictated through his work. So that means that you cannot be calling on the original name, you see what I'm saying? Without, or if you're using this name, Jesus, right, then that means that you're translating it through what? The language semantics created by a dethroned Moor who had now been Romanized, i.e. paganized, right, to now give you this, what's called the slow adoption. The change took over a century to reach the English printing by when? By I-611, in which the King James Bible still uses Eosus instead of Jesus. The finalization by I-629, the addition of the King James Bible, and throughout the 17th century, the J began to fully replace the hard I. Yes, this is the misdirection. This is a dirty Moorish converso who is now Roman, posing as a Christian, using semantics to then create a false time stream around an identity that was created by another dude who never even knew Jesus. This is Paul. So from now on, if anybody tells you, okay, well, where did J come from? You can say, oh, that was created by Gian Gregorio Trisanio, a dirty Moor from the Italian Renaissance. Didn't I tell you? It was the age of enlightenment. It was the age of Enlightenment, then the age of Renaissance, then the age of then the age of adventure, the age of discovery, then the age of Renaissance, then the age of adventure, then the age of the republics, then the age of industry. Because all of this is to move society closer and closer to the point that it does not control itself. And this is how they do it. they just like I showed you last week with the philosophers. This is how they engender everybody to go along with stuff that a common sense person would be like, this don't even make sense. Why are we calling him EO? Why are we calling him Jesus when this J was created by this guy? And who decided that this guy's idea of using J instead of I was where everybody should go? Who decided that? Because this is after the Council of Nicaea. So that means during the Council of Nicaea, he was still Eosus. He was not Jesus. You understand? Because it's all a scam. It's all people rewording stuff in order to bring further generations under their jurisdiction and getting people to explain it without them even knowing. You understand? So this wasn't finalized until the King James Version. And the King James Version, again, was based on James's interpretation of it, right? While at the same time, the original versions of it that was still in Aramaic was now banned as canon from the actual book. So when we go back further into the annals of what became the United States Corporation, we got to go back to the time in which, in which these states were basically their own countries. And as their own countries, they had their own way of doing business. They had their own way of settling things. They had their own way of moving that had nothing to do with how other places did they think. You know what I'm saying? And so because of that, they had their own national identities that you still have depending on the state that you are domiciled in. You understand? Like you still have your own. Like if you're from Mississippi, then you're a Mississippian. If you're from Florida, then you're a Floridian. If you're from Ohio, you're an Ohioan. You see what I'm saying? If you're from Kentucky, you're a Kentuckian. You understand? Because they're their own nations still. That's why they all had their own constitutions. What brought them into league with one another was the fact that they were all going to be a part of what they decided was going to be a compact union. Okay? All of this came about after I-492, which means that it all came about after the fall of the Moors, right? But these Moors didn't fall to no white people, they fell to their own iniquity, to their own political infighting, to their own denationalization schemes against one another, which then led to a fracture within the mind of the global populace that was under their dominion up until that point. And those that wanted to hold on to their original identities found it harder to do so when they were dealing with others who had chosen to use decoy names, you see what I'm saying, as placeholders for that. Like I told you, these Khazarian Jews, they didn't even have names at one point. Get the book 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler. He tells you this. They didn't even have names. What happened was after they fell under the jurisdiction of whatever lord or Moor or union or monarch of that time, they would be forced to take the last name of the land that they existed on. Okay? The conquest of America by the Spaniards in the 16th century, see, right around the time the J start coming in, was a monumentous event which had profound consequences in world history. See that? World history. If the Moors was just from Spain, then what Why was the whole world affected? Okay? Yes, indeed, Jay. They would also kill and take the names of their victims. You're right. Portugal was the leader in the age of exploration. See? During the 15th century, but Spain became the principal contender in conquest during the next century. It was she who blazed the trail for the European penetration because all of the Moors who decided to go into the Spanish monarchy, the Spaniards were now somewhat ahead of everybody else because of the fact that these dirty Moors decided that they were going to amalgamate themselves with the dogs that they had been using up until that point to take control of those who had deposed them. Right? It was said she who unfurled the first flag of Pensacola Bay, and it was she who planted the first cross, symbol of Christianity, which we know is really a symbol of Tammuz, right? On the shores of that bay. Hence, it was Spain and her soldiers who gave the paternity to Pensacola history. To her and them should go our thoughts during the celebration of the city's 400 years. Spain was eminently equipped for the conquest of the new continent. Why? Because they had and succeeded to get all of those Moors who didn't want to leave and didn't want to part with they amalgamated progeny. They was now on their side. So now they were now the new Romans. And she was the most Roman of all the provinces, contributing greatly to the success of the Roman Empire, because that's what the European empires were. They were all old Romans who were now getting their titles back from those Moors who they had now bribed or had now come into being a part of their new administration. Spain slowly developed characteristics of her own, see, because everything that Spain got, they got based on their affinity and their connection to the Moorish Empire. That was now reorganizing itself as the Spanish Empire, which then brought it into conflict with all of those other Moors who was not with that. Catholicism provided the unifying force of the divergent historical elements, see? Finally, the brilliant, dynamic Arab civilization was swept over the peninsula, pushing the Christians into the mountains, into the caves. From there, they recovered their lands at a snail-like pace. It took them 7 centuries until the Arabs, i.e. the Moors, also the Arabs, E-R-E-B-S, meaning Hebrew Moors, and peace was abnormal. The battle line between Spanish frontier and an institution just as important as the United States history. There was an eternal war against the Moors, but those men and women who prayed to Allah left a profound imprint upon Spain. Now remember, at this time we talking about Granada and all of that is over here. We showed the map last week. The Spanish nation was recast in a Moorish mold, giving an origin and new character that was an amalgamation of Africa. At this time in the 15th and the 16th century, Africa is in what we call Brazil. Remember, the continent of Africa is a Latin word. There is no Latin-speaking people in Africa to this day. Therefore, it was named by those Moors who spoke Latin. At the crossroad between the two continents was finally created a nationality most appropriate and typical of its geographic location. It was a nation full of energy, ready to turn the page. She would now go into full pursuit of conquest instead of having to serve as an unwilling host to its conquerors. That page turned in I-492 in the most memorable years in world history. The last so-called Arab Moorish soldier left Europe and peace came to Spain. Many veterans, listen to this, many veterans whose ancestors for ages, how long is an age? Somebody pull that up. This is how we know that they was in there longer than the time that they talking. Somebody pull up the length of an age and type it into the chat. This is how we know we was there way longer than anybody is giving us credit for. And this place over here right, was a part of the Moorish Empire way longer than they ever gonna give you credit for. How long is an age? Somebody put it in chat, and then I'll continue reading. Whose ancestors for ages had made a living of fighting along the frontier, became unemployed. Peace could bring a complete social and economic dislocation, but good luck was with Spain, because the same year a little-known sailor named Salvador Barco, aka Cristobal Colon or Colombia, opened up a new frontier across the ocean into the Indies, later known as America. The 7th Century War, the reconquest, was continued after 492 in America because they followed the other Moors back over here. An age is 1,000 years. A century is 100 years. So if these people are saying that the Moors were there for 7th century, but their ancestors have been fighting for ages, what is it? So an astrological age, thank you, Sentinel, is 2,156. So right here, we just read that they had been fighting for ages. So a multiple of 1,000 years. Yet they're saying that they were only there for 7 centuries, which would be what? 700 years. So that means that they were there for ages before. But it was the last 700 years of these untold ages that these Moors were then forced out and then were basically followed to and fro from the colonies into the empire. Addison, an age typically refers to a period of time that can vary in length, but it is often defined as lasting thousands to millions of years, depending on the context, such as the geological or history. For example, the Paleolithic age spans from 2.5 million years ago to around 10,000 years ago. So do you see what I'm telling you, Moors? They don't know how long you was ruling. They don't know how long the empire was ruling. They just taking the last 700 years and acting like that was the whole thing. No, we just read right here. What is this document called? You can download this for free. This document is called what? The Florida Historical Quarterly. So they just admitted and told on themselves, right? And it says that in 1492, instead of the Moors, right? The War of Reconquest was continued after 1492 in America. Instead of the Moors, the so-called American Indians became the target. That's because the American Indians were and are the Moors. You understand? They just started calling them something different because now the terrain is switched. We went from the colony situation, now we done chased them back to the empire. And now we're going to remake that to how we want. Consequently, when the Indians were highly civilized, as in Peru and Mexico, the conquest was the most successful. You see? So you can't talk about anything with world history without dealing with what happened in 1492, because the Moors had been ruling the earth for ages before that. And it was only the last 700 years that they actually fell. Because as we just read, an age could be anything from 1,000,000 years to 10,000 years. So who are any of these niggas to say what it really is? But they're going to say what it's not. You see what I'm saying? But time never was when man was not. That's what our Circle 7 tell us. Santiago, indeed. He said, while also added 1,000 years to their calendar, while deleting 1,000 years from ours, adding 580 just by grafting themselves into the history that they don't have. And that's what we just read. They had no history outside of us. Spain has never created anything that they created themselves. They never had their own golden age. Everything they had was based on us. Just like everything the crackers have today is based on us. So these Moors, after the successive wars over all of these years, decided that eventually that they basically settled into their own individual provinces that we call states today. And each one of those had their own aristocracy, their own ways of doing things, and all of that. So it wasn't until that they decided to compact themselves under what will become the Articles of Confederation that they decided to create some sort of perpetual union, a more perfect union. But in the process of doing that, they actually became and were usurped because they allowed these descendants, again, of these dirty Moors who were left over, right, from these wars to act as landowners from them, as landowners and uh and consuls, which is where we get the term consul, which basically is another way of saying lawyer, right? To work on behalf of them without knowing that they were going to find a way to usurp the deal. And that's what they did. There's a book called No Treason by a dude named Lysander Spooner, right? And in it, it talks about the fact that the United States Constitution, as we know it, was totally illegal. Why? Because the people who wrote it were not taking into account what the greater populace that was already functioning was happening. At the time that the so-called Articles of Confederation and all that was popping, Cahokia had a population in a metropolitan city that was double the size of London. You understand? People over here was popping to such a degree and had so many civilizations over here that was so well funded and spanned generation and centuries with their own technology and everything. And it wasn't until these little group of dudes got together who themselves were working for the crown and decided that once they were vested with the title, right, that they then would then usurp everything and put it under their own jurisdiction. The book is called No Treason. The writer was a guy named Lysander Spooner. Now, the logic is this. We know that the Articles of Confederation, when you actually look at them, you can actually see where these dudes got together and started to repurpose it and put in their own language, which was totally different than everybody else. And the fact that a lot of them, when they went in, they sequestered themselves, meaning that they did exactly what the popes do during a conclave. They literally locked themselves, 56 of them, locked themselves away in a little room, in a barn or whatever it was, and basically got together how they was going to basically reconscript everything to create a corporate society that would allow them to do this. This also happened right before or around the time of the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, when all of these niggas that was into the Freemason thing, which was the occult societies, decided that they were going to create the coming age society, in which the dark infernal ones that they served would be able to have free reign on the earth. Because now that the Moors have been deposed and they had so many people warring in the different states, that this would be their time to create one that would basically absorb them all. Okay? All agreements rest on consent. If there's no consent, there can be no agreement. Okay? Remember that. Exactly. Because we have to understand that what we understand as the Constitution and all of this stuff was actively created based on fictions. They're all created under a fictitious understanding. Because in order for a contract to be binding on you today, you had to be there at the outset of the contract, meaning you had to give prior consent to it happening. You cannot create a contract 200 years ago and then say that that contract is a party to everybody 200 years later that hasn't been co-signed or have agreed to be a part of it. You understand? Especially when you do not understand the full parameters and the full extent of the contract was not expressed to you through trust. You understand? All that does is create a legal term called fruit from the poisonous tree. Everybody got it? Notwithstanding all proclamations we have made to mankind within the last 90 years that our government rested on consent and that there was only a rightful basis on which any government could rest, the late war has practically demonstrated that our government rests upon force as much as any government that ever existed. The North has virtually said to the world it was all very well to prate of consent, so long as the objects to become accomplished were to liberate ourselves from our connection with the English, and also to coax a scattered and jealous people into a national union. You see that? The scattered people they talk about is the dirty Moors and the small hats that had conversed themselves and joined up with all of the nations that became the 6 nations that came about, that encompassed the new Rome after the fall. Okay? In proportion to her wealth and population, the North has probably expended more money and blood to maintain her power over an unwilling people. That's the rest of us, that any other government ever did. And in its estimation is apparently the chief glory of her success and an adequate compensation for all her own losses. The question of treason is distinct from that of slavery and is the same as that would have been if free states instead of slave states had succeeded. On the part of the North, the war was carried on, not to liberate the slaves, but by a government that had always perverted and violated the Constitution to keep slaves in bondage, and was still willing to do so if the slaveholders could thereby be induced to stay in the Union. Now watch this. What then is it implied in a government's resting on consent? If it be said that the consent of the strongest party in a nation is all that is necessary to justify the establishment of a government that shall have authority over the weaker party, it may be answered that the most despotic governments in the world rest upon that very principle. Isn't that how the police govern? Isn't that how the army governs? Don't they do that to you? Don't they create situations by which you are punished if you don't comply, but then they say that you're free? Does that make sense? How many people ever heard of George Mason, who walked out of the signing of the Constitution? George Mason, a prominent Virginian delegate of the 1787 Constitutional Convention, refused to sign the final U.S. Constitution because it lacked the Bill of Rights and created a dangerously powerful central government. Along with who? Edmund Randolph Bay and Elbridge Gerry. Mason withheld his signature, heavily influencing the anti-federalist opposition during the ratification of the debates. Mason believed that the Constitution lacked a declaration of rights, to protect the individual liberties, feared by the Senate was too powerful, and worried by the lack of constraints of the president. Ain't that what we're dealing with right now? But this theory of our government is wholly different from the practical fact. And the fact is that the government, like a highwayman, says to you, a man, your money or your life. And many, if not most, taxes are paid under the compulsion of threat. Government does not indeed waylay a man in a lonely place, spring upon him from a roadside, and holding a pistol to his head, proceed to rifle his pockets. But the robbery is nonetheless a robbery on that account, and it is far more dastardly and shameful. The highwayman takes solely upon himself the responsibility, danger, and crime of his own act. He does not pretend that he is rightfully to claim your money or that he intends to use it for your own benefit. He does not pretend to be anything but a robber. He has not acquired the impudence enough to profess to merely be a protector, and that he takes men's money against their will, merely to enable him to protect those infatuated travelers who feel perfectly able to protect themselves or do not appreciate his peculiar system of protection. He is too sensible a man to make such professions as these. Furthermore, having taken your money, he leaves you as you wish to him to do. He does not persist in following you on the road against your will, assuming you to be your rightful sovereign or account of protection he affords you. He does not keep protecting you by commanding you to bow down and to serve him by requiring you to do this, and forbidding you to do that by robbing you of more money, as he often finds it for his interest and pleasure to do so. By the very act of them creating what we understand as the Constitution for the United States, right, which is different from the Constitution of the United States for America, they basically created an institution that allowed them to perpetually rape and plunder everybody that was subjected to it. This is what led to us walking out of the original convention and all of the other stuff that happened subsequently after, because those original delegates that led Sine Die, right? They were the ones who realized that this whole thing was a wash because none of these people had jurisdiction to set any of this up in the first place. Because the very act of them creating the jurisdiction that they did was illegal, because anybody that is a party to the Constitution, like when they said we the people, at the time they did this, they themselves were enslaving people. We all want to make it seem like it was so-called black people, but no, these was melanated people who was doing this to so-called whites and everybody else, who then, based upon this, opened up the parameters for whites to eventually do the same thing to us by the very act of establishing a jurisdiction that up until that point did not exist, because they were not given the total right to create a perpetual document for everybody that wasn't even born yet. You understand what I'm saying? They created a perpetuum that up until that point could not and did not have the right to exist, because the Articles of Confederation, although not perfect, was still established by all the members of the individual states, which maintained those states having their own individual autonomies and authority. They did not have the right to perpetuate that and then force rule over people who didn't want to be a part of it. You understand? The war between the North and the South was a war between the two different Freemasonic jurisdictions, the Northern jurisdiction and the Southern jurisdiction. They want to make it seem like it was a geographical situation, but there was more people in the Southern jurisdiction than the Northern. And so they had to find a way to even it out. So they created a way to liberate the white slaves so that way they could bring them in to their union, which is why they were considered 3/4 of men. You understand? It was reversed. Remember, they were inverting everything. They made the masters the slaves and the slaves the masters. That's what emancipato means. It means to transfer ownership. So why would they transfer ownership from white people to black people if black people were perpetually the ones who didn't own anything? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't, because it was reversed. They gave us the history in reverse, a revisionist history in which they were now seen as that, but they had no land, they had no power. They themselves were outside of the law. Only the states who were their own countries had the right to perpetuate themselves. They were the only ones that had the right to have a union amongst themselves. So the only way they could do this was to create a new jurisdiction by which they could now rule. And this is what led to the war. This is what led to us walking out, because none of us agreed to any of this. None of us wanted our ancestors to be enslaved to this. This is why the federal government has the power that it has to this day, and why they were able to create an insurgency inside that government called the federal government, i.e. the Union of the United States, which itself was a compact of these United States, which was Rome, England, which was the Vatican, Rome, England, and the so-called black nobilities. And then they waged war, right, over everybody else, because now they were not only going to enslave us into this, they were going to enslave us into a whole new form of governance, in which now the occult would be the basis by which they rule. So by the time we get to the so when we talk about the American Revolution was the Civil War. They were all the same war against those free Moorish states, right, that were perpetual and had their own jurisdictions. They were all to be brought under the heel of one. And then once that one was secure, they then flipped it and created another branch of it, in which now they could further recess to the back and then create a foreign rulership over everybody that was still here, and then use that as a means of control over everybody else, and then create what they refer to as a perpetual union, right, in which now they could fool everybody and make everybody believe that the original Constitution was going to benefit them and protect their rights from that point on, so long as they all subscribed to what the federal government wanted, which itself was a lie. You understand? It was a lie, because they had already altered the Articles of Confederation, which is why George Mason and the rest of them niggas had walked out, because this is not what they originally had set up. They seen what they was doing. And so they went back to their own states to try to get their states prepared for what would become the usurpation. So when we talk about why the Mounds was destroyed and how the Cherokees was amalgamated and how all of these black nations that were here fell under the boot and was getting destroyed, and this is how it happened. This is how they did it. By using the original compact of the Articles of Confederation, which again was agreed upon at the time to be perpetual, but each state was to maintain its own autonomy, so that way one centralized government couldn't rule over everybody else. Because that's how we ruled it because that was all based on how the old Moorish Empire was ruled. Just because the Sultan was the Sultan didn't mean that he had control over everybody in the empire. There were hundreds of sultanates. There were thousands of sultans. And each one had its own dominion and jurisdiction. But the Grand Seignior, as they called him, the Grand Seignior, who they all was cool with, he was the spiritual head of it all, much like the Pope is for them with Rome, or what the small hats referred to as the Effendi, right? But they just take the E off of that, put an ER at the end, and put an O in the front, and then it becomes the offender. You see? This is the North and South that they were talking about. This is what led to the war. This is the forgotten cause of the Civil War. This is what led to the hijacking and them conscripting and taking these decoys and turning them into slaves and dogs of war again, because this was the eternal war against the Moors, like we read. This is a letter of surrender written by Governor Jonathan Worth to Governor W.W. Holden after being informed of the military's intent to execute General Order 120, which was the Lieber Code. It's part of the Lieber Codes, which was all based on the Noahide laws, which is all based on the Talmud, which is the Talmud is basically the rabbis saying that regardless to what God says, this is what we're going to do. So anything holy, we're going to do the opposite of that. Yesterday morning, I was verbally notified by Chief Justice Pearson that the obedience in the telegram from General Canby would today at 10 a.m. administer to you the oaths required to preliminary to your entering upon the discharge of the duties of the civil governor of the state. Civil governor, that's an occupying force. That's not a real governor. They use the term civil, like civil servant. That's another semantic language term for occupier, offender of the state, and thereupon you would demand possession of my office. I intimated to the judge my opinion that such proceeding was premature under the Reconstruction legislation in Congress, that I should properly decline to surrender the office to you. At sundown yesterday evening, I received Colonel Williams' commandant to his military post an extract from the Governor Orders number 120 that General Campbell's as follows. To facilitate the organization of the new state government, following the appointments are made to be Governor of North Carolina, W.W. Holden, Governor-elect, Vice Jonathan Worth, removed to be Lieutenant Governor and elect of North Carolina. I do not recognize the validity of this late election under which you and those cooperating with you claim to be invested with the civil government of the state. You have no evidence of your election save the certificate of a major general of the United States Army. See that? The Army, the United States, not the Army of the United States of America, the United States Army. This is the Union of the United States, the usurpers, the occupiers. I regard all of you as, in effect, appointees of a military power of the United States, the fiction, and not as deriving your powers from the consent of those you claim to govern. Knowing, however, that you are backed by the military without ceremony of actual eviction, offering no further opposition than this, my protest. I would submit to actual expulsion in order to bring before the Supreme Court of the United States, which is also fiction, the question as to the constitutionality of the legislation under which you claim to be the rightful governor of the state. If this past action of tribunal furnished any hope of a speedy trial, I surrendered the office to you under what I deem military duress, which means everybody who became governor of North Carolina or any government, state government from that point on was for fiction. None of it was real. I'm proving to you that all of these state governments, all of these federal, none of it is real. All of it is fictitious. It's all being run under threat, duress, coercion, meaning that it is a foreign occupying government. The Libra Code of 1924-1836, also known as the Instructions for the Government of Armies of the United States in the Field. You see? This is them. Who was Lieber? Lieber fought for Prussia, the dirty black Moors from Germany, before the German state was founded, in the Napoleonic Wars, and had been wounded in the Battle of Waterloo. He had lived or taught 2 decades in South Carolina, see, as a foreign agent, where he was exposed to the horrors of slavery. See, he was enslaved. And then, him being a small hat, he went to the law school and invested and created this, the Lieber Codes. Look, this now goes all the way up to 1900 when they finally took the rest of the land and occupying stuff that we still had. Look, whites kill Negroes and seize the city of Wilmington. By revolutionary methods, white citizens of North Carolina overturned the existing city governments and at once established their own. You see? 9 black men are shot down. Slaughters following the wrecking of the records. Didn't they just burn up the courthouse in Georgia? Y'all heard about that, right? Where they just burnt up the whole courthouse in Georgia, right? This is how they do it. They're doing the same thing today. Hours of terror throughout the city. Governor Ranzel declares the city under martial law and rapid fire guns are ready. Negroes, office holders, see, the Negro office holders forced to resign. The leader of the uprising is chosen as the mayor. I'm showing you, they don't have the power to do what they're doing. They're doing it by force of foreign arms because they were an occupying government that is posing itself as a legitimate government that was initiated after the usurpation of the Articles of Confederation, which themselves may have been an actual fiction, that then created the fictitious Constitution, right, for the United States of America, in which then they could create amendments that they would be able to use and switch everything up should they be in a position that the people would actually rise up and realize what was happening. This is American history. Their own hot-headedness. Senator Benjamin. Now remember, this senator is fake. These are the niggas who murdered and killed your ancestors to take over the governorship of the state, the mayorship of the state, the county clerks. All of this was our governments that they usurped between I would say between 1492 and now. But in this case, from 1492 to 1691, from 1691 to 1776, from 1776 to 1781, from 1781 to 1800, from 1800 to 1812. Then we fought against them again from 1812 to 1865. Then from 1865 we go into Reconstruction all the way up to 1900, which then technically by 1933 was the actual end of their actual occupation, which is why they are in insolvency now, because all of the original records, all of the original treasury, all of that stuff had to be laid aside, you see what I'm saying, for them not to have access to, which is why now they want to convert people into the energy to feed the data centers that they are trying to create to replace everyone, to make everyone slaves of. Tillman blamed the violence on the hot-headedness of the Southern blacks. Remember, the North and the South jurisdiction. This is Freemasonry stuff. Southern blacks, and on the misguided efforts of the Republicans, who were also Moors, who were also melanated during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War, to put white necks under black heels. He also defended the violence against the black men, claiming that the Southern whites will not submit to black men, gratifying his lust on our wives and daughters without lynching him, and an evocation of the deeply sexualized racist fantasies of many of the Southern whites, the Southern Freemasonic jurisdiction whites, the Scottish rights. And we have taken their rights away from them. He asked me, was it right to murder them in order to carry the elections? I never saw one murdered. I never saw one shot at an election. It was the riots before the elections which participated their own hot-headedness in attempting to hold the government, which means it was their government, our government, that they usurped by force of arms and rape and murder and pillage. In my state, there were 135,000 Negro votes or Negroes of voting age and some 90,000 to 95,000 white voters. General Canby set up a carpetbag government there and turned our state over to this majority. You see that? But I want the country to get the full view of the Southern side of this question and the justification for anything that we did. We were sorry we had the necessity forced upon us. You see this? These are the domestic terrorists. This is why they have listed whites to this day, whites in as white nationals as the terrorists, because they were the ones that they used to help usurp your role in your free elections when you were governing. This is what led to the destruction of the Wilmington race riots, which started in Wilmington, Virginia, like we just read, and went all the way out to Oklahoma after the Trail of Tears and all of that. And remember, this is after the Reconstruction. This is after the World Exposition Fairs when they brought them niggas out of the caves and all of that. Ask yourself this, and we're going to start to close out. Ask yourself this. Diplomas, when you get a diploma from a school, right? Right? You get a diploma from a school, right? So ask yourself this. Why were they giving diplomas out at the World's Fair? Did you know this? Did you know that? That at the World's Fair, the people who were at the fairs got diplomas after the fair. Have you ever gone to a fair, to a carnival, and left with a diploma? Have you ever heard of that? Also, the people who were at the fairs who got these diplomas prior to and after were referred to as delegates. They became delegates of the World Fair. Have you ever gone to a World Fair or any type of carnival or fair and been given the title of delegate? Have you ever heard of that? Well, that's what these people were. They were referred to as delegates, and the delegates received diplomas for their participation at the fair. Doesn't that strike you as odd? What was the diploma in? I'll tell you. The diploma was in the new fictitious history that they was giving these devils that was literally coming out of the caves or the underground situations where they were incubating them and creating them at. That's what I think was happening. Because these people would be walking around in full black Undertaker suits and shit and be at the beach in shoes and socks with horses and buggies and shit on the beach, walking around, going to these exhibits, seeing all of this stuff, taking it in, and then they were given tests. Did you know at these fairs that things like fax machines and things like this was actually displayed to them? See, diploma of honorable mention to Andrew Miller, who, right? South Creek Lumber Company in Michigan. Like, what? Yes, because they were all given diplomas in the fictitious history that they were now about to usurp. And then they used them as the bulwark because none of these niggas had parents. None of these niggas can trace themselves back before the 1800s that live here. They all was just out here and walking around looking crazy in empty cities that had been cleared out based upon all of the stuff that we just read. None of them built any of the things that they see. All of the stuff that was here was already here. Like I said, they had fax machines, they had phones, they had all of this shit in the early 1700s. Excuse me, probably even before then. They had answering machines. Look, they had all of this shit. Everything that we're using today, they had then, which again says that Wi-Fi and all of the stuff that we think these people have created was all recreated. It was all given back to them and doled out to them over the course of centuries so that way it could look like they were the ones doing it. But we know that Wi-Fi was created by a melanated woman. We know the video games was created by a melanated man. We know all of these things. We know that the Tuskegee experiment children were the ones that came up with the real stuff, with the real atom bomb stuff that they was dealing with at Los Alamos because the Oppenheimer and them couldn't come up with the right formulas. All of this stuff comes from us. These crackers didn't create nothing. They just put their name on it, took over the patent office, and then adopted it and gave those names to these people. And then to cement this thing, they became delegates of it, i.e. Freemasons. Look, the X-ray machine, now standard equipment in both hospitals and airports, baby incubators. What else? At the World's Fair. Electric typewriters, the telegraph, all of this. X-ray machines, fax machines, ice cream cones. Automatic gatekeeper. Look, the automatic gatekeeper at each fair entrance was the first to admit one person after receiving a proper coin and then automatically lock again. They had their own gated communities. Look at these niggas on the beach. Why would you have a horse and buggy on the beach? Does that make sense? Look at these people in full gear, full clothes, socks, shoes, all of this. Where are they going? What are they doing? All of this was them being put in position to be the people they are now. And now at this time and era, they have used up they've used up their welcome, and now they turning on them. That's why every city and state in the Union had a grand fire between the 17 and the 1800s, which wiped out all of the peoples and all of the property and all of the shit that was already there. It's all a scam. All of this was usurpated. None of this was by chance. All of these niggas destroyed everything and took control of it all based upon that. None of these people had jurisdiction to do anything that they did. And now that the grand war of the Masonic jurisdictions has restarted again, they're now trying to close it up. And they're trying to get rid of as many as these crackers and these people as possible. They running constant psyops against everybody. Constantly psyoping people. You didn't hear about Epstein. Now all of a sudden you get Palm Beach Pete, right? But then when you look at the data points on his face, it's basically the same person. So then he gets broadcasted all over news media, all on that. He on with Jimmy Kimmel. He on with this one. He on with that one. Why? Because they playing in your face. He taking pictures in the very same exact place that this nigga took pictures at. He driving the same car that this nigga's taking. Why? Because they trying to show you that they can literally have the nigga that you've been hearing about all of this time, that you know is not dead, that they've been using, that's been eating people, raping people, dismembering children, doing the worst things to people that anybody could do in the world. And they could bring him right back to you. Bring him right back in front of you, and you got to sit there and take it as if it's a whole new person. They literally playing in your faces. Then while they doing that, they turning it up on everybody who believes that they was free. Canada is a prison state, more so than this place. They done now demonize Christians where if you even quote the Bible, you're going to go to jail. What? And the people haven't risen up and destroyed the government yet? You could say the same thing about the people here. Why haven't they? Especially now that the government is totally insolvent. The government is totally insolvent. They have no money. Yes, Danielle, it is a tactic of demoralization. And it's another form of distraction to the point where they have everybody to the point where nobody knows what is real and what is fake. That's what they wanted. And they got it now. You understand? Where now people are online debating whether or not that if this is the real Epstein, if this or not. Like we're at that level. We're in that level of hell. You understand? We at that level of hell now. So now is the time for us to understand what is actually happening and who is actually happening to. We are the only Americans left. Everybody else is basically decided that they're going to be something else. Everybody else is allying themselves with fictitious, misnomered identities. And people who come the most out against us as Moors are the people who are the most paid to do so. I'm convinced now. Because there's no way you give a damn about what I call myself this much that you are trying to do videos or you trying to do exposés and all this other type of shit. It just shows me that one, you're a paid agent, and two, you're also so inundated with false history that all you can do is fixate on people who don't give a damn about what you think. That is a sad life, if you ask me. That's the saddest life to live. Because then your whole existence is waiting for me and others like me to do videos so that way you have something to talk about because you're that stupid and that lacking in your own creativity that you have to have something that somebody else's do to inspire you to do something for yourself that doesn't even come from yourself. You understand? They got fake white Asperger niggas doing videos, watching our videos, talking about who we are. Meanwhile, he's speaking on the hybrid that he is. You are the hybrid, nigga. You are the one. So all you can do is speak on my history because you have none of your own. So remember what the Demon Pike said. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences by the Argenter of the so-called Illuminati, which itself was destroyed by the French Moors in the 1700s. The fake Illuminati that we're talking about now, these are all the oligarchical papal families and black nobility that's ruling and whatever from the shadows, right? So the war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, the political Zionism, state of Israel, and this is before Israel even existed, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall then unleash the nihilists, right? This is what they call the Black Awakening, and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm in which all the horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of the absolute atheism and the origin of savagery and most of the bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens will be obliged to defend themselves against this world order. So again, this is what they all was down with. So all of these actors, all of these rappers, every one of them plays a part in this destruction. Yes, that's why they're pushing the AI and all of that, because the AI is to the point where now it's just feeding on itself. That's why they want to create a bigger AI functioning through 6G, which is why they need so much extra land that they can use to feed it. So they got to burn out land. They got to get rid of a lot of people and get rid of land so they can use that land to feed that. Then eventually it's going to be a problem because the data centers, because these machines are alive. So they drink water. You understand? They feed on land. So they got to take more land from you, more land from the original people, more water from you to feed these damn machines. So they talking about the oil shortage and this and that, but remember, the United States got more oil than everybody, believe it or not. That's why all, like I told you last week, all of the major oil riggers and anybody that's doing that usually come here, especially in Texas, to get consultants to help them make it and extract it and turn it into crude and vice versa. So this is where we're going. So it's very prudent for us to be able to get our shit together so that way we can move forward in whatever it is that we're going to do to protect ourselves from these fake false flag cataclysms, from these fictitious governments that have been functioning for so long they don't even understand that they was never meant to function in the first place. Remember, we were invaded. None of these people are from here except us. They want to tell you that the Moors wasn't here and this and that, but these people who claim themselves Hebrews are the very ones who destroyed, as we showed and proved, the so-called Native American, the so-called American Indians, i.e. Tsalagees, by becoming Cherokees and all of these English versions that were mixed with these child sacrificing Hebrews, right? Who turned against their own people and amalgamated with the same beast that they say we are. This is them. This is them coming over on the boats. This is these demons. If you focus in on some of these faces, some of these people don't even look human. These are the Siberians. These are the ones who became, killers of the original people in the Midwest as they expanded westward after seizing the lands illegally. Here go the Mexicans. See the Mexicans right here? There's the Mexicans. There's the small hats. There's the Siberians. There's the Russians. See? There's the Frenchmen. See the Frenchmen right here? Here they are, all of them. All coming in on boats. This was the transatlantic slave trade. The Slavic trade, as it is truly called. Anybody have any questions? Yes, they do look like demons. Anybody have any questions? Indeed. So again, I thank you guys for coming through. I thank you guys for all the support. If you want to hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. Please check out www.aseer.com as well as www.cordovaorganics.com. definitely appreciate all the support and people buying the products as well as my books. Got some new ones coming soon, so please stay on the lookout for that. Exactly, Brandon. Demons don't care about skin shade. That's right. You can use the AI to your advantage. I just wouldn't depend on it. You know what I'm saying? If anything, we need to be fortifying our AIs to battle their AIs. So when they send their AI infrastructure at you, you have your own AI that's going to protect you from their version of it. That's where we need to start going, training them to actually have and understand what true nationality is and how to basically create trusts and documents and things like that that transcend the paper, transcend the paper empire, so that way we can start to deal and have those represent us in true life, as opposed to us always having to retrain it and retrain them the paperwork into another fiction. Instead of dealing with a fiction to fiction, we need to start dealing from living blood, living man and women, right? And using that as the protectorate against going into their fiction and battling them within it. We need to stand on the outside of it in the realm of true creation and basically deal with them from the top down instead of from the bottom up or on an even playing field, because there is no even playing field in the paper empire. It can only be you battling their version of it with yours. So because everything is claimed, they have, in order for their fiction to be right, their claim has to be true, but nothing that they claim can be true because everything they have done has come from the fruit of a poisonous tree. Therefore, anything that they bring forth as claim cannot really be proven by them, because a dead man cannot prove the life of a living man. You understand? So let's start looking at this paperwork stuff that everybody talking about in a whole different way and start to elevate what it is that we're doing instead of becoming more bogged down into it. It does. It takes a concerted effort, but that effort begins with each one of us as individuals that come together as individuums. And then we all basically stand in the true empire together. Because paper burns. You know what I'm saying? But blood, you know what I mean, is immortal. So with that, thank you guys for the support. Again, if you want to hit me up for any consultations or bookings, anything like that, hit me up at houseofella@hotmail.com. Please subscribe to my YouTube page, aseer.com. Become a member if you can. Also support the app. It's the app right now on Google and Apple Play. And if anybody else have any questions, just hit me up and let me know. And we'll take it from there. All right? Islam. Draconium Malut Laudibus. Pax Ed Amor.